Assalamualaikum. My name is Rin. My question is directed to Dr. Heba. A few days ago, I read in a local paper, a non-Muslim actually commented saying,
Here.
Okay, there was an article in a local paper here in Malaysia. The title was, I do not want to pay income tax to fund religious institutions. The writer of this article is a non-Muslim, a lady, and I'm pretty sure after this her face will be marked for persecution, especially in this country. So she gave reasons which are factual, which is pretty real. She says that she's a Christian, basically, so she pays teeth to her church to fund any religious activity. So her proposal, the reasons why she says she doesn't want to continue paying income tax to fund religious institutions because of the activities of these religious bodies. She gave examples of, I'm not really sure, no, body snatching is not part of it. Confiscation of, for example, religious books of other religions, persecution against religious temples, for example, and also conversion of minor children by disgruntled spouses upon divorce. They convert to Islam and forcefully, unilaterally convert children and denying the rights of the parent remaining as a non-Muslim. My question is whether in either a civil state or an Islamic state, whether that is possible. Because in this country, basically religious bodies, institutions are funded by the state, by the government, by taxpayers, both Muslims and non-Muslims alike, male, female, gay, bisexual, whatever not. If our income is taxable, that is where the funds come from. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum, Dr. Heba, and distinguished panelists. This was great and interesting, and I learned so much. I mean, Dr. Heba basically has become my unofficial mentor and guru, just because she speaks to the questions that have always been lingering in my mind, and she, doesn't pull any punches. So I'm a student in Qatar, Ahmad bin Khalifa University, and she graced us with her presence there earlier this year. My question comes from her statement, tying politics to basically environmental existence, the real, state of the world, human nature, and not separating those two things, and then talking about urban planning, because my interest is environmental policy. And I totally agree, and my upcoming thesis is to try and look at why the Muslim majority countries and the Muslim world in general are always last when it comes to, I think, cleanliness. And nadafa min al-iman, that's what I thought our religion taught us, but I don't see it when I live, I work, or I walk in a Muslim majority country. So do you think that if we were to have a Muslim majority country, and we want to call that Islamic, in order for it to become a civil state, that the environmental battle should be their #1 priority? And by that I mean not giving or selling their souls to the devil by competing for the capitalistic selling land and getting rid of poor people and inequality, but also just really, there's so much treasure here, so much natural resources, so much, but for how much longer? So I was hoping that you can answer that question about the environmental battle as being maybe one of the priorities for a Muslim civil state or an Islamic civil state. And really quickly, I just wanted to ask Dr. Maszlee, if possible, why he didn't think the well-being of the people was a responsibility of the state. Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Mohammed Hussain from UAE. I'm studying history and civilization. So I would just like to point out, I'm missing Dr. Farid Al-Attas. He would be talking about Ibn Khaldun. So nobody actually, I don't know, I came late, so I did not hear if anybody actually spoke of Ibn Khaldun. That I think it would be very relevant since you're talking about Islam and Muslims and contributions. So in a previous lecture you gave somewhere in YouTube on Wal Halaq's impossible state. So I think you pointed out that he was referring to the fact that the modern state is all about controlling nature, the level of control that mankind can have. That has increased in modernity. So one thing I'm interested in is that it has also been about controlling the nature of man. So like in the modern state, we see that people are under surveillance all the time. So in an Islamic state, would this surveillance lessen or would it actually increase? How would we justify either? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Though I was challenging the notion of the civil state, the question repeated the same approach, and they said, in the civil state, if it is Islamic, will that and that be acceptable? What do you think? So I will say what I think, okay? So I don't, again, speak for an Islamic state. I don't speak in the name of an Islamic state. But when you were talking about that a citizen, a Christian citizen of Malaysia, doesn't want her money of taxes to go to supporting religious institutions that do not respect religious diversity, as far as I understood, I think this is her right. And I think that citizens broadly have the right to prioritize in some aspects where their money would go. And supervise that. And with new technology, it is not very hard, because, for example, in what we once suggested in Egypt 2012 that people would donate to support the finances of the country, the budget, the national budget. And at the time when people said, oh, we are willing to finance the budget, we are having inflation and we are having a crisis and the debts of Egypt, etc., so why don't we donate to the country? And we're very enthusiastic. And my opinion was at the time, okay, I'm willing to donate for the country, I'm willing to give everything, and even invited people to give, women to give their gold, as we did during the war, the independence struggle of Algeria. It was very common to lead campaigns in Egypt at the time, because we were very socialist and Arab nationalists, you know, to donate money for the independence struggle of Algerians. But I would like to know where the money would go, and I would like to track it. You know, DHL allows you to track your post, you know, so why not the country allows you to track your donations or to track your taxes? So, and you prioritize. You say, of course, there are sections where you don't have the right to, so say, for example, I pay $100 every year, given an example, so 20% I don't have the right to decide, because it's like goes to the public finances generally. And then I say, I want my money to go more to education or to rural development or to this and to that. So this is my opinion personally, that this holistic approach should be more diversified and divided, so that I know where my money goes. For example, during times of war, it would be definitely be considered treason that you say, I don't want to fund the army because I'm not convinced about the war they are leading against terrorism, but it's not against terrorism, it's against citizens. So this would be very, very serious issue, and then you would be accused of going against the national interest of the country. So it needs to be discussed how far a citizen has the right to decide where his taxes go. This is worth looking into. I remember, it's not only about Malaysia, I remember that I was in Sweden with a Muslim, staying with a friend who is a Muslim convert, and she is living in Gothenburg. And she said to me that part of the taxes, because the official religion is Christianity, goes to the church. And she said, in order for you as a Muslim to say, I would like my money to go to the mosque, you have to go and make a claim. So it doesn't go automatically that once you are classified as a Muslim, the money goes or doesn't go, according to your decision, to funding the IFTA authority or whatever. She says that her money goes automatically as a citizen to part of the tax goes to the church. And they have to claim that Islam is the religion, so you have in the first place in a secular society to prove that you are a Muslim, to raise the issue that I am not just a Swedish citizen, I'm a Muslim Swede, she's Swedish, okay? And I don't want my money to go, please direct my money to this or that cause. So I came across that request oppositely. I mean, if it's a Muslim convert in Sweden. So it is an issue that is, I think, definitely worth mentioning, including a bit of fishy and risky consequences of that regarding if you are a pacifist and you don't want to fund the army, would you have the right to do so, or would you be considered betraying the country's ultimate goals or whatever? So we have to look into that. Because the political question is more important than the sectarian one. And there are serious political issues at hand if we open this folder. So I go from the very specific to the very broad. Regarding environment, why there was no interest in environment, I would analyze that definitely sociologically and politically in history rather than religiously. Because I think that across history, on the contrary, actually if you read the history of awqaf, of endowments, Muslims endowed money. Interestingly, these fantastic Muslims endowed money to cats, to put milk to cats on the streets, to put wheat for pigeons in the yards of mosques. And people bothered even to think about what if a small child is working and then while he was handing a liquid from one place to the other, because he is a child, he was not concentrating, he fell, and the capital was lost. And there was an endowment to compensate for whatever was lost by children who are working but were not very careful about what they were transporting or moving from one place to the other. So this is a mind that is very specific, very complex, and very compassionate, and very rahim. So how come then that we dealt with nature and environment in such a lousy way in our, I think somehow, politically speaking again, the sense of loss of social responsibility with the creation of the territorial state that claimed itself to be a moral agent. The state tells you, if you see an accident, don't interfere. You are not an expert. Call, dial 900, okay, or 9010 or whatever, and we will come and take care of everything. You can't, you stay there and watch. Use your mobile and call us. None of your business, okay? But what if I can help? You're not an expert. You can cause more harm if you interfere and move the person, and it might affect his body in a negative way, etc. But I want to do something. I want at least to help him. No, it's none of your business. The wider title was rule of experts. Okay? You don't know how to do things. We know. We will do things and you step aside. And according to that, in the nation state, modern nation state, there was a transfer of functions. You don't know how to educate your children. You are too backwarded. You are ignorant. We will take them and educate them. So transfer of function of education to the state from the awqaf or from the madrasas or from the local communities. And now look at the level of governmental education and public education in many countries in our world. I think that this affected very much a sense of responsibility of the people towards the environment, plus colonialism, that actually made them feel the country is not ours anymore. It's like, why should I care if the British or the Dutch or the French are going to take everything, and if I donate or if I care, they are the ones who benefit, So there was a focus on struggle of independence and struggle for freedom, but there was not a care of the environment, like even if it is colonialized, I'm going to look after it because this is my responsibility. I am rahma for alameen under colonialization or without colonialization, So I think it affected the morale of people somehow, because in history we didn't have that. On the contrary, we were very much caring of the environment. We were asked even, we were told that if you, in the middle of the desert, put a tree, you put the seeds of a tree, every creature, not human being, creature, that would pass and stay under the shadow of that tree would count. This would count in your thawab and good deeds on the day of judgment. So how come that we shifted from this to that? I think it must have been the loss of a sense of communal responsibility, and we should look into why we lost it. We had it in a very fantastic way, and also the sense of you need to bring back what we call in modern language a sense of ownership of your own country. People feel like this is not my problem, and unfortunately Islamic movements did that to people as well. Somehow people felt like, oh, Islamic movements are there, I should not take care of my religion. I mean, I shouldn't defend my religion and promote it, etc. There are these Islamic groups and movements and parties, and they're doing a good job, you know. So somehow, generation after generation, person after person felt like somebody's doing the good job. I can be a bit more. And some people even told me that, you know, like, I'm not a good Muslim, I'm not practicing, but I like the good ones, and they are looking after religion, and one day I will come around and join. I want to enjoy my life, you know, wear my bikinis and go around and be a bit foolish in my life and enjoy life. And I will, one day, I'm a good at heart, and I have a good relation with God, and one day I will come around and just join again. And I know that I love you, you good people who are looking after our faith, etc. This delegation went from the political to the religious to the cultural to someone else is doing the good job. And that's why I always tell my students, and when I go to mosques and preach, etc., I do that also. I say, consider yourself to be the last Muslim. Always consider yourself to be the last Muslim, as if you are the last one on earth who is carrying the message of Islam, and act accordingly. Don't be light-minded about your Islam. You know, consider yourself to be the last one carrying the message, not just one amongst many billions and millions. So this is very important. Surveillance. I supervised the translation of a series of books by Zygmunt Bauman into Arabic, and one of them was Liquid Surveillance. And it came out a year ago, and I wrote the introduction. So I do think that surveillance is a production of modernity because of the massive society. You need to provide security, and you can't have a police officer around every corner. And sometimes it helps fight crime, but it also helps the government collect information about people, and it makes you under scrutiny and under the eye of the state all the time. Of course, the security issue is important, but we can say that 10% security provided, 90% control. So we have to, again, talk about it. It's not about Islam or not Islam. I mean, I don't need to go to the Quran to find a paragraph or an ayat regarding surveillance. I'm a citizen and I have my Islam. You know how we think Islamically? We think Islamically when we really understand Quran and Sunnah and think. It's not about only carrying the text under your arm or flipping through the book when a fatwa is needed, you know, or it's about genuinely being a Muslim and then thinking about the world. And this is how Prophet Muhammad taught his companions. He didn't tell them, these are the instructions, follow them, 1, 2, 3, 4. He said to them, what if you go to some place and people ask you about something and you run out of answers? And he said, then I would just, you know, reflect and give them my opinion. He said, okay, but beware. When this happens, don't tell them this is the opinion of Islam. Tell them this is my opinion, so in case it's wrong, you don't make fitna. You don't make them feel like, oh, this Muslim came around and he told us so and so. The distinction is very important. And I remembered when you were talking about Medina as well, I translated the book of Ziauddin Sardar of Mecca into Arabic. And it actually appeared already. And you said that it will appear in bookstores in September. It actually came out already. It's a very interesting book. It's about the history of Mecca, and I enjoyed very much translating it. And it was a hard endeavor to translate from English into Arabic, and to all the things that he explains to non-Arab speaking Muslims. I mean, I just try to go through them softly because he's explaining to a non-Muslim. When it appears in Arabic, it's different. The translation issue is very tricky. So one of the things that struck me, and I never noticed it actually, to say the truth, and I learned it from Sardar. I mean, it was a very, very sharp remark. He's a very, very bright, sharp person, mashallah, and his endeavor in life to find answers, even sometimes we don't agree with some of his ideas, is just, it deserves respect. So he said something very important. He said, didn't you notice that Prophet Muhammad established the political community in Medina? And then there was the Fath of Mecca. He opened Mecca and went back, and then he had the first pilgrimage showing Muslims, the first and last, the only pilgrimage he had, Hajj, and he taught Muslims how to perform Hajj. He didn't stay in Mecca. He went back to Medina, which is striking. You know, we know this fact, but we never tried to ask why. It was very logical to stay in Mecca. the Mecca that he loved, the Mecca when he left Mecca, he cried and he said, if your people did not force me to go out of you, I would have stayed in you. And he talked to Mecca as in a loving manner, and the way he used to remember Mecca and the way he loved Mecca. But when he had the opportunity and there was the victory of Islam and Mecca was opened and he had Mecca back, he didn't stay there. And there was that separation between the Qibla of the faith and the city of the political community. And across history, no caliphate was based in Mecca. It was in Baghdad, it was in Damascus, it was all over the place, but Mecca stayed the Qibla of the faith, not the Qibla of politics. This is very important to reflect upon, and I think if we give it more thought, we can come up with a lot of discussion around that. It's not a separation of secularism, separate religion and faith and politics. It's about distinction of spaces, roles, functions, and raison d'etre of areas and spaces and spheres. And this is very important, very important.
I mean, based on what you mentioned, distinction between the religion realm and the political realm, I think I would suggest you guys to have a look at an article written by Saadidin Osmani, the current Prime Minister of Morocco. He was a psychiatrist, still, but now he's a Prime Minister. Okay. Okay, he's a psychiatrist, come ulama, come politician, combining himself all the disastrous elements. Anyway, okay, I think your question has been answered by Dr. Heba, actually. She was pointing out at the idea of big state. When you have big state to determine what is good and what is not for you, what is well-being and what is not, and they dictate how to implement that well-being, that's the end of society. That's the end of individuals. The discharge of responsibility. It's not my job to clean whatever mess in front of my house. It's the municipality job. It's the state job. It's not my job to help poor people when I see them on the street. It's the job of, you know, a ministry of this, ministry of that. Okay, this idea of discharge of responsibility is dangerous. Actually, it should be considered that you should ask yourself, what should I do? Okay, that comes back to the idea of environment. Let me quote you an anecdote. I think the year 2011, just after our forum, I was invited to Japan as part of their, they call it a ASEAN Young Scholars Convention or whatever. I was still, fellowship, yeah. I was still young then. I'm still young again, now. Okay. You know, they brought us to certain places, and with us, another academics from Indonesia, from Singapore, from Philippines. So after watching and after witnessing all those, you know, Japan is Japan. You know, the cleanliness, the level of tidiness, everything is organized. You wouldn't find late train, late coach or whatever, everything on time. So, you know, in one of our meetings with the Japanese professors who are specializing in Islamic studies and Southeast Asian studies, so one of our friends from Indonesia was saying, said, everything here is superb. This is Islam without Muslim. Unfortunately, back in our country, we are Muslims without Islam. Yeah. And that Japanese professor was astonished. Said, this is not the first time people telling me about this thing. The other days when we have, you know, imams from Egypt, from Pakistan, from everywhere, they were saying the same thing. But for me, it's not about Islam or Muslim. It's about common sense. These are common sense. This is well-being. This is well-being. So we should live with common sense. Nobody wants to live in untidy environment. Nobody loves dirt and messy environment. Everybody wants everything to get organized. Everyone to live in a well-being manner. So he said, I think, he came up with his solution. Said, I think it's not the issue of Islam or not, but it's rather the issue of education, the level of education, what we educate our people. But I would like to add something more on it, the way we understand religiosity. I still remember I was asked by one of the star reporters, he said, don't you think that our community nowadays becoming more religious? He said, Muslims are becoming more religious. I said, excuse me, what? What did you say? He said, Muslims are becoming more religious. I said, I don't think so. They're becoming more religious. They're becoming more conservative, yes, but how do you define religiosity? She said, people started to put on hijab, started to put on skull caps, started going to the mosque, those kind of things. I said, I told her, that is not religiosity, that is trending. I couldn't imagine people that you described, when they wanted to go to the mosque, they just park their cars or their motorbikes anywhere. And sometimes it blocks mine. I couldn't imagine people with the characteristic that you have mentioned, throwing, whatever they have inside the car, or the cigarettes outside the car. I just couldn't imagine if people with those characteristics, when they see disabled people, they're not thinking on how to teach our government, to push our government to promulgate better policies to help those vulnerable people. For me, it's the way we understand religion. That is why it's very interesting when we mention about Muhammad Abdul, we should not forget Jamaluddin Afghani, the guru. This is your guru. The guru of Muhammad Abdul was Jamaluddin Afghani. Jamaluddin Afghani, when he was commenting about the situation of Muslims during his days, not now, during his days, said why they were very underdeveloped in compared to the colonials. Unfortunately, he was in France. Said because they are losing the collective shame. I'm translating it literally into English, but it was mentioned in Professor Hussein Alatas. Somebody was mentioning Farid name. Farid's father, late father, he mentioned in his book about Rasuah, about corruption. He said, what we miss in Muslim society is this malu secara collective. We lose that. We don't feel ashamed when we see a lot of dirt on our streets. We don't feel ashamed of the potholes on our roads. We don't feel ashamed when we are driving over the speed limit. We don't feel ashamed when we look that our disabled children are being abandoned. They are being left out from the society. They are being left out by the educational system. So without this feeling of collective shame, we cannot develop. To be a developed nation, we must have that. And in order to have that, the way we understand religion, the way we understand religiosity should be upgraded. It should go beyond personal issues and spiritual issues. It should go towards the area of well-being that you mentioned. And it should not be dictated by the state. It should be dictated by the people through their understanding of religion based on the originality of the source and akal and common sense. If they ignore common sense, they go into literal interpretation, they ended up to be like ISIS. If they using akal without the authentic sources, there will be something else. So we need to combine both. And there's one thing I was about to say. Common sense, well-being. So what is the role of state then? The role of the state, just like I mentioned to you, it should be minimized to secure the border, to ensure law and order, rule of law, and to ensure policies that will benefit people. Public policies that will benefit people. And they must allow a huge space for society to excel and to take care of themselves. Thank you very much.
I wanted to add something to what you were saying that came up to my mind. An understanding of shame, an understanding of social and moral responsibility entails an understanding of time. And this is one of the lessons in the Quran that have been neglected. In the Quran, God says, and they will carry the burden of their bad deeds and other burden of other bad deeds. وَلَا يَحْمِلُنَّ أَوْزَارَهُمْ وَأَوْزَارًا مَعَ أَوْزَارِهِمْ. and the consequences and the sequence of your action in time and space, it's very important to imagine. It's part of building an Islamic imagination. Like when I was teaching my children not to throw something, and I was driving, and my son simply had his ice cream, and then he threw the paper, the cover. And I stopped the car, and I went back and said to him, pick it up. I said, come on, mommy. I mean, the street is not clean. And يعني ما جاتش عليا. It's not me, يعني. So you focus on me, and everyone threw his things outside. I said to him, yes, because after you, other people will come and say the same. And you will be responsible for yet another person who will say, it's not only me. Go and pick it up. Okay? The sequence of actions. If I do something wrong publicly, it's not about, oh, you're not doing the good thing, you are not doing the wrong thing because it's wrong, but because you are afraid that people will say something and you'd be shamed and named, etc. It's not about that. It's not about that I don't do the bad things because people look at me. And this is bad enough, because you should do it because it's wrong. You shouldn't do it because it's wrong. But because as a Muslim, I think I would be ashamed of meeting God, having caused such a sequence of bad events. When people see me doing something wrong publicly and they say, look, even her, even him, who is such a very famous person, he's doing this and that. Why should you blame me? If those people can do something like that and it goes unnoticed, I can also do something like that and it goes unnoticed. Beating women goes unnoticed because many men simply saw it happening in their families and in their neighborhoods, and nobody raised the fingers to stop it. And they say, everyone is beating his wife. It's common practice, Why should you look at me and say, they do not get straightened up unless you give them smash them on the head, It's because he saw people doing it and nobody's. That's why al-amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar, forbidding the bad and asking people to do the good, is very important. So I think what matters in social action is that people think this way. There is another way of Islamic thinking, which is calculating of expenses. If I buy an expensive bag, what is the most expensive? The French one with the V. Yeah. The Louis Vuitton, yeah. It costs something like $200, $300, $3,000. And then I start calculating. If I buy a similar bag, where I simply, as usual, throw my stuff inside that is completely not organized. This is my habit. Very disorganized. Very anarchistic. Okay, so I buy, so I have this small bag. I bought it because it has so many zips, trying to train myself to be more organized. Okay, if I buy it, this one was in a sale. It is a Samsonite, looks nice, it's okay. Yeah, it has so many things that, and I think it cost me $30 or $35. I bought it in an airport in Istanbul. So I start calculating when I start spending money, because God will ask me about the money I spent, how I earned it and how I spent. And I say, this is equal to 100 Louis Vuitton. I can buy, if I can spare $3,000, then buy yourself this nice bag. It's very useful, it's good quality. And buy 100 bags and give them to young students in the universities, poor ones who are not able to buy new ones. And this is a way of calculating. And you do it all the time. You say, if I spend this, I would do that. Okay, I can treat myself a bit, but at the same time, okay, buy something else and give it to someone who has the money. I cannot think about buying an expensive car, because I always have this way of thinking, if I buy myself a Mercedes, this is equal to 10 Opels and it's equal to like 50 small Fiats, for example. And my mind works this way. That's why I don't usually wear brands, and because I know that one thing is politics of compassion. I care for those who don't have, and I feel ashamed actually of having something so expensive and others are just sleeping on the street. And at the same time, I know that on the day of judgment, I will be asked by God, what did you do and what did you do that? Not because I'm perfect, because I was taught that by Islam. Sometimes I don't do this because I'm a human being, but we have to teach our generation and children how to think differently about the consequences of their actions, and how to calculate the good life. What is a good life? For me to have everything and someone else is living nearby who has nothing? So what is a good life for me? This is not a good life for me. I will not feel happy to have something while others don't have anything. So this way is a sense of social responsibility. It's not only environmental, it's social as well. But people more and more were taught to think about themselves, where the notions that were marketed are notions of self-fulfillment, look for your own, the notion of time is money, for example. I can't do that because time is money, it just takes too much time. The whole notion of compassion is about spending your time doing things that will not get you money. My dear, compassion is about spending time that is equal to money without getting anything, because you feel that you will get it on the day of judgment. It's a notion of time, by the way. It's very philosophical, and it's very epistemic. It's about the epistemology of Islam. And if we think this way about politics, about society, about the self, about happiness, about living our life, about what does it mean to have a good life, I think many things will change in our life.
Hello, this is open to the panel. My name is Sean. My question is Malaysia a civil state? Is Malaysia a civil state? And if it is it Islamic? That's the first question, right? Second question is, okay, one question, okay, then, yeah.
I want to change the question a bit. We all seem to be discussing how religion affects the state or the state affects religion. But the understanding of religion is not actually discussed in any way. I mean, the example given is the recent case in Saudi Arabia where a lady wore a miniskirt and was put on the internet, and everybody got such a fuss over it. But every day they've been seeing people being bombed in Yemen, and no ulama ever complained. And I'm also thinking that, I mean, we should be discussing what kind of Islam do you want. So the way it's portrayed in Malaysia, especially the ulama or the faqih, only seems to discuss trivial issues. They become totally irrelevant to what's happening in society. Whether it's the issue of corruption, whether it's the issue of poverty, it doesn't seem to be an Islamic issue. But if some lady takes off her tudung, it's a total uproar, as if, you know, Islam but when somebody sells a tudung for $3,000 or $800, that's not an issue. So how do we change these priorities? I mean, if religion is to be relevant, or to be made relevant, especially in this case, if we're still going to decide whether Malaysia is an Islamic state, not an Islamic state, maybe should we decide what Islam is first?
I'll just respond to the second question. I guess if you if you were here during my presentation, then I guess the answer should be, you know, straightforward. We have seen my definition on what is a civil state, and definitely Malaysia doesn't at all fulfill the condition to be a civil state. Thank you.
Right. Let me follow your footsteps. Yeah, I'll try. I would have this to say. Despite us trying to really get to either the Islamists or the secularists, I think we have been able to discourse without having to resort to any kind of name calling, right? The entire discourse was, to me, very civil, because we were actually hoping to achieve at the end of the day an enlightenment. And that's a lot that Dr. Heba has provided today. Let us give a big, big applause for her. Now, I would want to only say this, that because we are able to do that today, this is what, I'm not proselytizing, this is what Parti Amanah Negara intends to do. Okay? We want to make this Islam, as Dr. Isham has said earlier. What Islam that we want to advocate is finally about life fulfillment. It's finally about achieving the maqasid, the purpose and the higher intents of Islam, rather than, sorry for my explanation, rather than RUU, rather than a punitive punishment-based Islam, rather than that mere legal corpus of legal prescription. We want to have Islam that could be imbued in the civil state. Islam as the reference, not Islam that is coming by way of a coercion and compulsion on others. Morally, what is the word? Policing almost every action to provide the freedom within a certain constraint, within a certain social construct and contract, which is essentially the constitution that we all subscribe to. We would like to see Islam, Parti Amanah Negara, we would like to see that all the policies and advocacies and the legislative process of this nation to have what, from our point of view, betterment from, as far as we're concerned, I have no comment to say this, from the Islamic references. That is our raison d'etre. Meaning, we have values to share. We have principles that we feel would be for the betterment of others. We are not saying that we are holier than thou, but we believe that we, through this contestation, through this democratic process, electoral and otherwise, would achieve a civil state with Islamic references. You can turn around to me and say, why call it Islamic? It's just that because we are Parti Amanah Negara, we have some Islamic references, and you may have what have you. And that constellation would be very exciting, fulfilling, and civil.
That's much longer than mine.
Oh yes, certainly. I'm sure I can't do that. But this is what in short, in a nutshell, what Parti Amanah Negara stand for. Because we believe we are the second generation political Islamists, or rather political parties which is now known as the Muslim Democrat, and our main advocacy is finally to achieve the higher intents of Islam, the higher intents of Sharia, rather than picking on only that legal punitive prescription of Islam. I think.
Well, I just want to focus on 2 points that were discussed through the different interventions. Because I think when we talk about the community, we're talking about the social contract, but at the same time, I have a problem with the notion of contract, because contract actually sort of encapsulates some of the agreements in writing or in set rules, while actually the speed of change that we are witnessing will lead to...
It is very dynamic.
Yeah, so I'd rather focus more on the rules of deliberation and the mechanisms of deliberation that would renew that imagined contract all the time, rather than have... That's why I think constitutions are, on one hand, a good idea, but on the other hand, problematic, because it's very hard to change the constitution in modern systems while the constitution is outdated in the course of time. So this is the issue. So I just want to focus on 2 issues that we discussed in the different interventions. One thing is, again, the time. When I talked about the city and the importance of understanding the urban dimension of civility, it is very much embedded in day-to-day life. And we have been thinking about our topics in a grand narrative, in a long durée, in the long time span imagination. And I think it's very important to focus, and this is what we learned from fiqh. People have always been blaming fiqh for being too particular and too much focusing on the details, but unless you understand the details, you will not see the wider picture. That's why fiqh and usul al-fiqh come together. Fiqh, it teaches you what to do in details, and usul al-fiqh gives you the methodology. This big narrative or big vision, in a way, is very important as well. So how to combine both? How to understand religion in terms of its in terms of religion as a paradigm, the notions in the very epistemic sense, but also how to understand the little bits and pieces that actually form the mosaic picture of your exercise and your religious practice and religious experience as well, because religion is also an experience, and there is a big dimension of culture in it. While culture should not impose itself on religion, we will not understand religiosity unless we understand the importance of culture and the respect of culture, because you will not be able to understand faith detached from its context. The second point that I want to stress, so that we take it along with us when we are leaving, is that always relate theory to your own life and try to theorize your life as well. I mean, when you go through an experience, try to see the ultimate wisdom of it instead of just falling into the trap of that it is very peculiar. Try to draw the lines between what you are going through and a wider perspective of life and the lessons that can be learned for you and for others as well from what you're going through. And I think that when we're talking about the experience of the state, and Professor Farouk, you mentioned the Muslim brothers in Egypt, for example, I have always told the young people who dropped out of the Muslim brothers or are very critical now, that you should see also the Muslim brothers within their own context. The problem is that they did not claim that what they are doing is very much relative to their experience. They said, نحن الجماعة الربانية. They said, we are a holy group of people. And this was a fatal mistake right from the beginning of the da'wah of the Muslim brothers in the writings of Hassan al-Banna. And I think that this sort of elevating self-ego of I am the good Muslim, every Muslim is a good Muslim as long as he takes Islam in his hand and tries to improve the world with it. And regarding the appearance and the day-to-day life practices, one of the most beautiful things I saw in Istanbul for the past year is the woman who came into the mosque. She was wearing trousers. She's at the same age as mine, in her early 50s, a bit chubby, with a t-shirt, okay? And she looked like someone who's passing, because what is so beautiful in Istanbul, people go to the mosque to stay there. You know, you can find old people in the garden of a mosque just sitting there. They might not even go to the prayer when it's cold, you know, but they're just, you know, they like the space, they like the serenity or whatever. And she went in, and we have this made up. We have this place fountain of water where people perform wudu. In my country, women never make wudu, of course, in public, because they go to the more closed spaces. And this woman was not there in the first place. So she just went straight to the maida in the middle of the mosque. She started making wudu, and she finished, and then she took out of her bag a scarf, and she stood on a side and she prayed. She took away the scarf, went out, and I was looking at her, and I said, this is so beautiful, that Muslims feel safe in the spaces of faith and religiosity, not feel unsafe because they will be always judged by the way they act, the way they talk, or the way they look. And I think this is very important, to bring back safety and a sense of security to the spaces of practice of religion in our society.
I was thinking of something else, but you struck the chord of something else. You know, it's true. I mean, it's very unfortunate. Religious issues are very stressful nowadays. Religion itself is a stressful issue. You know, and religion has been portrayed, or has been not only perceived, but only practiced as something that will divide people, polarize people, rather than things that make people come together. I think it's the time for us now to change that attitude. I mean, if you have problem, if you have, you know, problem in your life, you know, stressful things, the first place to go is the mosque. But sometimes you go to the mosque, you get more stress. It's very unfortunate. We need to change that. We need to change that. And actually, what I was trying to say is, you know, people talk a lot about maqasid Sharia, but we tend to forget about maqasid insaniyah, or insaniyatul Islam, which is the core things that have been taught by Quran and Sunnah. Insaniyah means humanity. And talking about humanity, well, I'm not trying to promote this guy, but you're talking about humane economics, you're talking about civil society, or masyarakat madani, civilized society, or madani society, and you're talking about religion and culture. You cannot abandon this book, Asian Renaissance, written by Dato Sri Anwar Ibrahim. Whether you like him or not, but he has been talking about this in the 90s. It's very unfortunate nowadays people are talking about religion as if Ganushi was the first starting, was the first person started talking about, Islam and, democracy and talking about religion and culture. No, Anwar Ibrahim has been saying this in his book, Asian Renaissance, since the 90s. I miss those years where we did not discuss about petty things about Islam. We did not discuss about all these petty fiqhi ikhtilaf, about Wahhabi, non-Wahhabi, all these non-fruitful things that is not helpful, that are not helpful to our religion. Those days we were talking about elevation of poverty. We're talking about religion and culture. We're talking about interfaith discussion, We're talking about humane economy, which is very Islamic. Okay, so we need to read this book again. Maybe, I don't know, nothing to do between me and him. That is for sure. I don't belong to. Okay, okay, it's very interesting too. Just now when Dr. Heba was talking about social responsibility and whatnot, it just reminded me of, the idea of common sense. Common sense is very Islamic. Why? Because there's a sound hadith in Musnad al-Imam Ahmad, narrated by Imam Ahmad and been categorized by Ahmad Shakir, by Sheikh Shuaib al-Na'ud as Sahih, where I couldn't recall the whole matan in Arabic, but Kamakal, it sounds like Ma min khairin ma qultuhu aw lam aqulhu fahuwa minni. Translated, if there is any goodness, whether I have said it or have not saying it, it's from me. Prophet Muhammad was trying to assure you, if there are any good things, any goodness, whether you could find it in the Quran, in the prophetic tradition, or you couldn't find it, but it could be accepted. It is universally accepted. It's a universal value, universal good, common good, and it's from you. Rasulullah trying to teach us an epistemic, philosophical issue, which anything good that Akal could accept it, and it is not contradicting with Quran and with prophetic tradition, it is Islamic. So I don't need to ask this question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Maszlee, Dr. Heba, Dr. Dzulkefky, and Dr. Farouk. I think Dr. Maszlee struck a very good point at the end, that when it comes to Islam, he relates to his story on the mosque, where we are supposed to feel safe, and also the main point, I think, what we should be able to get is that civil and being Islamic is a condition of safety, of security, of beauty, of peace. And this is something which we, in a way, should highlight more when we talk about Islam as religion and society. So I'll end our discussion here today. And once again, I think I should call for an applause for all our speakers and also to all our participants today. Thanks a lot for those who contributed as well with the questions and comments.
That long for anyone. So thank you very much for sitting that long.
Yeah, and also patience. That is also part of being Islamic and civil, right? Okay, I edit here. Thanks, and remember, just as a reminder, for tomorrow we're going to have another session, also featuring Dr. Heba. The discussion will be a lot more controversial. Maybe we're going to touch a bit on secularism. That's something more or less as the theme of the topic, and we do welcome you all to come again. Thank you, and see you all tomorrow. Assalamu alaikum.